Madison Bell carried her modest world in a thrift store purse, walking with purpose down the cobbled path leading to Greenfield Elite Stables. She was a second-shift school cleaner, accustomed to the rhythm of mops and dusters more than the refined rituals of equestrian life. Today was special. It was the culmination of months spent stretching each penny with meticulous care. Her destination was a riding lesson, a long-held dream spurred by her late mother's whispered hopes. The stable was a world apart, draped in elegance. Polished wood gleamed under the soft morning light, and Madison inhaled the mingling scents of fresh hay and expensive leather. Her attire, a contrast to the polished glow around her, leaned towards the practical and worn, faded jeans and a plain, threadbare jacket. Clutched awkwardly in her hand was a plastic shopping bag holding her Spartan riding gear. Inside, the opulence continued. Riders in crisp, tailored attire moved with a grace bemusing to Madison. She approached the desk, a little unsure, mixing up terms as she asked for directions to the saddling place. Vivian, the riding instructor, glanced at Madison with a dismissive flick of her eyes. "The horse teacher, right?" Madison clarified, trying to mask her nerves with a smile. Vivian's laughter cut through the air like a knife, sharp and public. "The horse teacher? My, you really are out of your element." Her words stung. Madison's cheeks burned as some patrons observed with curiosity, while others chuckled and shared knowing glances. She felt exposed, stripped of her dignity, standing in the spotlight of scorn. The dream Madison cradled bloomed into bitter humiliation, a momentary lapse revealing just how wide the divide between her world and theirs truly was. Madison felt the hot sting of tears threaten to spill, but she forced them back, swallowing the lump forming in her throat. Determined to maintain what little composure she had left, she spun on her heel and made her way out of the stable, each step feeling heavier than the last. Her heart pounded in her chest, partially from the embarrassment, but mostly from the stark realization of how her dream had unraveled in public shame. Behind her, the whispers and muted laughter continued. Some of the casually amused patrons watched as if observing a sideshow, their glances pierced her back as she walked away from the scene of her ruin. Others turned away, perhaps out of discomfort, their faces carefully schooled into expressions of feigned ignorance. Madison didn't wait to decipher who was who, she simply needed to escape. Outside, the sun had reached its zenith, casting bright patches of warmth on the idyllic landscape that seemed to mock her misery. She wandered a few steps before collapsing onto a weathered wooden bench near the edge of the paddock. Her plastic bag sat at her feet, the riding boots within an unwanted reminder of what had just happened. As she sat there, memories began to surface, playing in a sequence that made her heart ache. There was her mother, with her gentle voice, sharing wistful tales of horses and the open countryside, a dream left unfulfilled. Madison remembered promising herself she'd ride someday, even if just once. She'd saved every extra cent, forgoing small luxuries and enduring the silence of skipped meals to allow this moment. Yet, a few words and jeering laughter had dismantled her courage. Just last month, she had celebrated her 30th birthday alone, quietly marking the time in solitude. It was supposed to be the start of something, a turning point that would ease the sharp edges of routine into something beautiful and affirming. Now, the pain was sharper than ever. Her life had been a tapestry of struggle, each hardship woven into the fabric with a determination that few acknowledged. When her father had fallen ill, Madison had taken on 2 jobs, juggling shifts in a blur of exhaustion and grit. The money earned saw hospital bills paid and fleeting hopes tethered to practicality. She remembered choosing whether to buy herself something nice or pay for another week of treatment. Those choices had shaped her into someone resilient yet quietly desperate for a moment just to breathe. It was here, outside of the stable that represented crushed dreams, that a deep internal shift began. As the rich aroma of horse and hay washed over her, a sliver of quiet defiance took root within her. The words of Vivian shouldn't have so much power, and the laughter of the bystanders shouldn't decide her worth or dreams. The earlier feeling of rejection transmuted into something rare, an ember of resolve steadying her heart. While Madison allowed the painful memories and quiet reflections to ebb and flow, she watched the horses. Their serene movements calmed her, reminding her of the simple beauty she'd hoped to experience directly but had been denied. The realization that her strength lay not in the grand gestures but in quiet perseverance came slowly. For a moment, she considered walking back inside. Apologizing to Vivian, maybe laughing off her mistakes to try again. But the late afternoon sun settled over the fields, and she knew part of her heart was already moving beyond the stable walls. In time, the bench's seat grew hard against her bones, and the chill from the breeze sunk into her skin, reminding Madison of the passage of time. She stood slowly, gathering her bag and leaving behind fragments of regret to merge into the earth beneath her feet. Madison wasn't leaving defeated. Instead, she took with her the new understanding that her worth wasn't defined by the mocking jokes of one instructor. It lay in her ability to press forward, to face down the derision of a world that tried to keep her in the margins. And maybe, most importantly, in her capacity to protect the small, vulnerable joys others ignored. As she made her way towards the gates, losing herself in thoughts of why her mother had so loved this place, she noticed something out of the ordinary. There, past the curve of the barn, she spied tack room doors that seemed scarcely maintained and a stack of tools left haphazardly, a potential danger to both rider and horse. She paused to observe closely, hoping it might be a sign or simply her perception colored by the day's events. Her heart quickened as she noticed something more, an easily overlooked sign about fire regulations fluttering weakly on the stable wall, its edges curled and faded. She couldn't recall seeing the familiar array of fire extinguishers or emergency exit signage as she walked the halls confined by indulgence. Just beyond the tack room, she overheard muted voices, a pair of stable hands hastily exchanging concerned words about equipment negligence and a recent injury the management had discreetly swept under the rug, minimizing its implications. The sadness that had enveloped her lifted slightly as a firm resolve took its place. Madison realized she was witnessing the underbelly of negligence. People, animals at risk because of carelessness disguised as sophistication. Surely, the world needed to know. She drew her phone from her pocket, the dim screen reflecting her furrowed determination. Precise fingers tapped out an email, capturing photos of potential hazards with a chill certainty gripping her heart. With each word, Madison's earlier despair transformed into a beacon for justice. It wasn't just about her anymore. Larger stakes loomed, unacknowledged by those inside their protective gilded walls. As she pressed send, she took a deep breath, set each foot down with newfound purpose, and turned away from the stable. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows against the idyllic fields, marking the day's end. But in Madison, the dawn of something entirely new and profound began to unfold. Madison's feet moved almost of their own accord, carrying her away from the sanctuary of the sunlit bench. The fierce resolve growing within her since leaving Greenfield Elite Stables ignited with purpose as she picked her way through the gravel path leading back to the street. The afternoon air was crisp, biting at her bare hands and ears, but it solidified her determination not to be deterred by Vivian's disdain. She walked a route less traveled by the visitors, tracing the outer limits of the equestrian estate toward the public exit. Here, the outer stables and occasional storage sheds mingled with patches of currently neglected land, a stark reminder of nature's tenacity even amongst curated opulence. It wasn't long before something caught the corner of her eye, an open padlock door hanging ajar with a spray of tangled halters and bridles visible within. These details pulled her to a stop. An impulse to check if anyone had come upon the same conclusion stirred her heart. With cautious interest, she approached, peering into the interior cluttered with riding gear and pieces of forgotten equipment. Her earlier assumptions appeared affirmed by the disarray of gear, some frayed, tangled, and poorly maintained. Madison recalled echoes of Vivian's voice, dismissing monitoring as unnecessary for our caliber. Her fingers closed around her phone again, cautiously taking photos, each shutter click capturing a potential safety oversight. Rounding the corner, she found herself near a side entrance where two stable hands with peaked caps exchanged hushed words. They were unaware of her presence, and their conversation, clear and fraught with urgency, was inadvertently laid bare to her. "Oh, it happened again last week," one of them, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, murmured. Another twisted hoof. "The boss wants us quiet on it. Equipment needs fixing, new shoes. Management doesn't want to spare the funds." The second, a woman with a quick, furtive glance to the main stable entrance, added in hushed tones, "They can't patch it over again. It'll get out." They spoke of Vivian as if she was more concerned with image than well-being, more intent on maintaining the sheen of perfection over implementing genuine measures of safety. Madison's breath caught. These were not just minor oversights, but a looming risk, an overwhelming danger that potentially affected them all. Those dependent on this stable, horses and staff alike, stumbled within a delicate line of appearance versus reality. Her hands trembled slightly as she rehearsed internally what she must do. It was not her world, and yet she couldn't turn a blind eye. Once she was far enough from that small revelation, unobserved, and her spirit hardened with knowing certainty, Madison tapped her previous email draft. In addition to alerting animal welfare, she expanded her note to include local building safety authorities. Words flowed quickly, candidly detailing what she had seen and overheard, each sentence neatly accompanying the grainy images she'd captured. When she hit send, a remarkable sense of empowerment enveloped her. The decision to take this stand, to ensure accountability, was fundamentally unlike the woman who had arrived eager yet bashfully at the stable gates earlier that day. As she left the estate behind, thoughts of potential ramifications mingled with hope. The quiet but sturdy resolve within Madison assured her this was the right action to take. She may have been the recipient of ridicule today, but in doing what she could, Madison gave voice to needs easily stifled by those valuing reputation over rightness. Her footsteps, once faltering and burdened by shame, felt renewed, as if bordered by an invisible, altruistic competence radiating outward, an accompaniment particularly welcome amidst her own newfound clarity. Reaching the street beyond Greenfield's peripheral masquerade, Madison breathed in the crisp freshness of late afternoon, exhilarating her tired senses with its promise. There was nothing ostentatious about the surrounding suburbia, streets lined with quaint cottages murmuring of domestic life in action. Slowly, she left Greenfield's grandeur behind, its elegant yet hollow echoes fading gracefully with the settling dusk. Later, within the quiet comfort of her modest apartment, she readied herself for the familiar setting of work. The simplicity of her space felt grounding, surrounded by well-worn books, soft blankets, and photographs that painted tales of her fluctuating life paths. A brief yet determined gaze scanned those images, resonating faintly as they whispered familial resolve softly into her willing consciousness. The evening unfolded peacefully, each of her habitual cleaning tasks undertaken within the school's quiet corridors, a world devoid of judgment yet filled with thoughts presenting themselves as sincere comfort, cloaked in simplicity. The steady swishing of the mop, the brushing of fabric against wooden chairs, offered a momentary retreat, binding resilient spirit to diligent hands. Madison understood implicitly the stability of her own environment, the school's air familiar and reassuring despite its own untidy realities. But unraveling the threads entangling misjudged perception and harmed well-being at Greenfield Elite Stables represented more. It represented justice, not only for herself but for those unable to express it openly. What would Mum say, she pondered, allowed to breathe within exclusive reverie. She imagined her mother's steadfast encouragement, felt the touch of those familiar whispers nestled within echoes of shared dreams unresolved yet never fully abandoned. Leaving work that night, Madison looked out over her small town, relieved and unmemorable except for one distinctive feature, her choices. And that was enough, a destination worthy of embrace and meaning, of newfound perseverance charted as simple yet sturdy determination. Yet, unresolved energies and questions lingered into existence around what would come next. For now, though, Madison was content to let those possibilities organically unfold. There was strength in knowing. Knowledge lay as liberation, and her actions, once hesitant diffidence, urged onward with the promise of positive change. With every step that took her further into the quiet evening, Madison left behind the burdens of that trying day, carrying only promises kept close at heart. Returned home, she unwound peacefully among familiar comforts, content in the timid shadows of moonlit reassurance, reflecting upon the unpredictable quality of determination birthed by acknowledgement and courage, to simply take action. Within a week, the whispers Madison had heard at Greenfield Elite Stables had evolved into a public outcry. Her emails, sent without expectation beyond the need to correct what she had witnessed, had sparked a chain reaction that unfolded with breathtaking speed and reach. First came the arrival of the authorities, a collection of neatly uniformed inspectors representing municipal safety and animal welfare. They descended upon the grounds of the prestigious stable with meticulous efficiency and quiet authority. The once peaceful estate, with its manicured fields and genteel facade, became a scene of measured chaos as stables, tack rooms, and common areas were scrutinized under a lens much sharper than legacy prestige had anticipated. Madison, watching the developments via local news broadcasts and eager social media updates, saw the world react to the revelations unfurling from her faintly shaking fingertips a few days before. Greenfield's tightly controlled image cracked open like the worn latch she herself had captured, revealing the tumors of neglect and indifference hidden behind the tapestry of elegance. Online, the narrative grew organically from the words she had braved to write. Within her community and across platforms, Madison found unexpected allies and champions. The ripple effect of her modest yet decisive act invited stories resonating with shared undercurrents of institutional misconduct at elite spaces not often questioned. People came forward, riders, stable hands, and even patrons who had witnessed or experienced similar carelessness. Their voices gathered strength and momentum, binding together in passionate solidarity, fueling the public's anger and unease. Madison's story, hastily crafted as a footnote, found its place centered within the frame, tugged gently into prominent focus by journalists able to draw parallels between local and enduring narratives in which silence, often unnoticed, was the true adversary. The authorities' investigations unveiled violations that could not be ignored. Safety regulations neglected, substandard housing for horses, and health codes compromised by the very negligence Madison had perceived from her stilted, emotionally fragile morning. Faced not just with Madison's eye but the community's voice, Greenfield Elite Stables received stern penalties these violations demanded. A cease and desist order brought business operations to a temporary halt. Courses were cancelled, daily transactions suspended. A commanding presence warned of more if reforms weren't undertaken and witnessed for continued compliance. Vivian, the riding instructor whose condescension blazed a path to Madison's moment of courage, found herself spotlighted as a figurehead embodying an underlying problem. Management, seeking to dissociate their inadequacies from her actions, publicly announced her suspension pending a full review, condemning the behavior she displayed that day. Madison watched the televised fallout, Vivian's once tightly controlled arrogance replaced by the uncertain resolve of someone unaccustomed to reprimand or accountability. The transformation, uneasy as it was, filled Madison with something close to pity. Although her modest apartment felt mostly unchanged, a constant stream of support arrived unseen, through messages typed with grateful fingers, notes scratched with raw vulnerability, and calls from voices awash with relieved validation. Each was a miraculous treasure igniting glimmers of companionship across the solitude she had, for so long, worn comfortably close. Her own community extended gestures of admiration. Co-workers who had previously known her simply as a quiet, reliable figure found newfound respect swelling within gentle acknowledgments exchanged in break rooms. Fellow commuters who crossed her path offered warm smiles and encouraging nods, reinforcing the knowledge that her leap, daring as it had been, mattered. Perhaps most rewarding were the emails she read late at night, eyes shining in the dim light spilling softly through her living room window. They came from other ordinary folks, cleaners, clerks, young and old alike, stepping forward to recount experiences of exclusion or derailment rooted in predetermined perceptions or complacent privilege. She realized that in offering her voice, she had unknowingly granted courage to many more. In the aftermath came others inspired to rebuke the structures that allowed disparities to persist. Madison lit the spark, a spark that unlocked others and shifted the visibility of these unequal dynamics, even in the affluence-confined sanctuaries. The movement she had quietly emboldened offered new pathways of dignity for the unknown few longing to be seen. As the viral story unfolded throughout the networks of entwined lives, changing conversations flourished within Greenfield's own ranks. Writers demanded elevated standards, staff demanded accountability, and management responded with promises of reform and transparency that, while desirable before, were now mandatory from outside watch. Revisions implemented through changed practices came under scrutiny, but nonetheless brought strides along corridors once paved with intentional reverence closed to everyone beyond the esteemed few. Madison found herself carrying not only the reminder of her action but the delightful burden of her community's pride. Her story inspired people to be proud of their roots rather than shamed by antiquated lies projecting inadequacy upon those with simple, modest means. Though months might pass before Greenfield Elite Stables reopened under guidelines properly recalled to vigilance from complacency, Madison's awareness extended with grateful reach, knowing she touched tens who rose with her until injustices began to shake. One individual had quietly transformed expectations, prompted by unexpected courage sourced within the ache of an insult, and in doing so brought to light urgent truths, righting paths thought previously unraveled or lost. Her world, unnoticed, had expanded with intangible dimensions latently filled by tenacity's embrace, unstoppable and ever welcoming to new song emerging from society's shifting orchestra toward a choral march of proud defiance. Madison settled back into her routine with the foundational rhythms that had always given her comfort, feeling new life into old habits. Each sweep of her mop across the classroom floors held a knowing familiarity, but this time beneath the quiet echoes of her daily work lay an undercurrent of accomplishment. Though outwardly unchanged, she'd unleashed confidence flowing beyond its historic boundaries. The acts prompted by a deepened course had returned courage, generously shared, as vibrant assurance now woven into each step revitalizing her path. As she walked to and from her modest apartment, through the town she knew like the back of her hand, Madison felt a subtle transformation within herself. Though her clothes remained simple and unadorned, there was a newfound clarity in her stride and a quiet confidence reflected in the way she carried herself. Her heart wore remnants of kindling warmth that uplifted spirits connected once to rooted struggle, underscored by values only understood by those whose resolve traversed untrodden paths. One afternoon, as she brushed past the tannery of parked cars lining her street, a letter caught her attention amidst roadside clutter, a folded note veiled in transparent envelope glass reflecting mundane expectation. It bore the emblem of the city's Animal Welfare Department. Inside, penned neatly upon embossed paper, lay heartfelt gratitude from officials acknowledging how her photos and alertness safeguard those deserving of kindness beyond mere utility. It reminded Madison why taking action mattered and further emphasized how our lives are connected by shared responsibility for each other and the world we inhabit. Her phone buzzed several times that week with messages from journalists asking for interviews, compliments from individuals praising her resilience, and even an invitation to speak at a local civic event dedicated to recognizing unsung heroes. While the attention was initially overwhelming, each positively charged encounter crystallized her place within the simple yet profound sense of community she'd unexpectedly woven a pivotal bond with. Madison accepted some invitations but declined others, allowing the gentle tide of reach to whisk her recurrently back into momentum surely equal parts grace and steel foundations. Her choices, objectively small yet profoundly assertive, bolstered integral authenticity gleaned from days of unseen toil nurtured long before resilient notoriety unveiled courage. She balanced the new with the familiar, and everywhere she went, support mirrored steady encouragement. Weeks passed with Greenfield Elite Stables still shadowed by the repercussions of discovery and renewed transparency in progress. Walking home after work one afternoon, curiosity drew Madison toward the stable's grand facade, driven by a sense of closure intertwined with vindication. Renovations were unfolding as promised, new fire safety systems visible from afar and enhanced structured pens ensuring secure housing. A sign greeted her at the entrance erected newsface announcing essential changes underway, much of which undertaken to rebrand the establishment not by incidental recommendations nor rational demands required but through transformative engagement, welcoming those previously disturbed at entering upon reckoning spaces tightly held, previously intellectualized as uninhabitable. Those transformative efforts arose profoundly seen through Madison's lens of simplified pioneering action. Her phone vibrated softly, interjecting a brief moment that fractured her reflection. An email awaited her. Vivian's apology arrived, briefly worded yet sincere, acknowledging hurt embedded in slighted remarks hatched previously unconsciously and regretful beyond mistaken assumptions. Madison read the brief note with mild surprise but overcame sentiments matured by innate understanding, perhaps realized in herself that dismissals, while thoughtlessly executed, have consequences unfurled emotionally. It sought to release upon seeking poignancy within reconstructed resolve assured invariably by transcendence. A punctuation of smile blessed Madison's lip within forgiveness freely granted for sentiment reduced to hollow echoes devoid of significance long renounced by meaningful inner growth nurtured compassionately. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and continued her walk down the familiar path, carrying lessons of humility and interconnected strength renewed within still present, reflective wisdom, an embrace perpetuating valued alliance found upon inherent vibrancy blended smoothly, gathered tightly to serenity. Upon returning home, she settled into her unassuming living room where favorite books knew by touch reunified mind and heart through exquisite understanding. Empowered, Madison began crafting a short essay at the request of a community newsletter, scoping her experiences as charged prism in light of hope's capacity, cradling sincerity inviting wounds bound by divisions clasp into their shared narrative resolutely transforming face of elegance defending dignity. The soliloquies she composed returned appreciation explicating shifted empowerment entrenched paths born, in time to sunlit evolution of debut vibrancy. Her pages danced with glimpses past lost shores, woven certainty from unspoken deeds known only behind unseen curtains before grace revisited untapped troves restored explicitly beyond expectation leashed harmony. Madison slipped into daydreams, inhabited fully by the heartwarming presence of giggled laughter issued from cherished narratives forged over least fondness, recounting vibrant interactions from newfound peers united by revised vision, clear, uplifting, inclusive, everyone invited to weave journeys collective melody complementing triumph resonating pulse deeply nurtured gentle fellowship. On an ordinary weekend morning, as the sun cast its gentle glow upon the awakening town, Madison found herself sitting with friends at a local cafe, laughter mingling over steaming mugs of tea. Their conversations intertwined between light-hearted tales and supportive exchanges uplifted with the resonances that echoed Madison's transformative journey from overlooked cleaner to unsung hero. As light-woven brilliance suffused shadows parted gently by camaraderie resiliently defining tapestry emerging prominently amongst gracious timber reconstituted, Madison recognized eloquent acceptance warmly illuminating simpler source. Elemental celebratory patience remained recognizing unprecedented grace intact resolved explicitly implicit contours cast outright through paths intended, pervasive patience shoring perpetually timed joy imagined redefined associations highlighting integral harmony transcendent nestling upon accustomed solitude, demonstrably because courage shared defies borders quietly constructing truth and valor liberated, reciprocating indefinite lights uprising within hearts emergent untamed grace unfolded. Balancing solitary humility known prior. Madison may not have possessed wealth or status, but she found value nurtured roots revitalized. Her spirit walked local streets renewed, awe-inspired, a stranger to herself no longer, gifted with transformative insight richly influenced through action derivative passion giving rise unanticipated journey saluting courage's mighty embrace nameless gesture embraced, connecting aspirations unyielding integrity entwined, reconciled.